But since we're talking about like hires, we did get three very important ones. We're gonna start with the top dog of CW Entertainment, and that's Brad Schwartz, who was making the rounds with interviews. We haven't even gotten through all of them ourselves, but he has given a bunch of information. It kind of made me feel like, did Brad tell them we need to start talking to people in the
No, I was like,
outlets?
Brad, keep talking, dude. I love this.
Because he was sharing as much as he possibly could. I think the biggest takeaway, at least for me, has been the amount of times that he had to say it needs to be profitable. That is going to decide whether a show stays or it goes. I think in the Hollywood Reporter one, that sentence came up like 10 times. He was emphasizing it. In fact, in one section, he said it in two separate sentences in the same point that he was making. I was like, I get it, Brad. It has to make money.
The PR told him to use that word and he ran with it. I think it's important to highlight that every time the words the CW and profitable were used throughout this whole last year, everybody was like laughing in the comments saying this network never made any money. This network was poor, explains the budgetary issues. And you're like, no, that's not the same thing. Brad explained it very well when he said in that interview that the reason the CW has never been profitable as a network has because it has been a hub for bigger networks to put shows that can then air and then be sold to international audiences for much more money. Thereby, the shows become profitable, even if the network is not. And to use an example of how the network never gets credit, if Arrow is released on DVD over here, it says Warner Brothers. Even though Dynasty's on Netflix, it says CBS after it's finished. So the studios are getting all the credit and the studios are making the money. The CW is nowhere to be seen outside of the US. I don't know whether they plan on changing that because it certainly doesn't sound like they're focused solely on international audiences the way the original CW was. But I do think you're going to see the building of the CW as a brand, because over the last couple of years, it's kind of just been running on vibes and its reputation from the Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries and Arrowverse days. Whereas now I think we're going to see them try to build the CW as a brand with compelling original CW content, and thereby original CW shows can be sold and the network will finally make profit. The network will be more of a brand. I appreciate it. I understand it. And that's the kind of transparency we were talking about last week that can actually help us go with the flow and understand where they're going, because it's been hard out here. We did not know really what their end game is. It's not that clear, but it's a lot less vague than it was beforehand.
For sure. And then I think what has been great about his interviews is the explanation for a lot of what's been happening. Like you mentioned, Michael, about why the CW isn't profitable. Like we've been saying it, but it's been nice that someone from who's going to be working with CW actually said it, which also means that this gives explanation for the amount of shows that they've been canceling, not just like trying to free up the roster, but also they don't own them. Like that's what the issue has been. That's why they're not profitable. So they want to get to a point where it's their shows bringing in the money. And that makes sense. I mean, so essentially it boils down to this was a business decision and that's just what it's going to be. But I'd rather them say this was a business decision and I still get dragged. It's not that they're not going to get dragged for it, but it's nice to hear that it was a business decision. I think one of the interesting things in this IndieWire interview was that he was saying that the streamer gives them an opportunity to compete with Pluto TV, Tubi, and Roku, which is interesting because it's free streaming. And the CW app has not been used in that way. It's generally just been a hub for CW shows with licensing of a few things here and there, but they have been beefing it up. So the fact that that was dropped in the interview makes me think that we're going to be seeing a lot more licensed movies and TV shows popping up on the CW app, which, considering that they have been adding a lot, there's Scream Queens, there's like the updated version of Rosemary's Baby, which surprised me. I wish I remember which Florence Pugh movie is on there, but there's a Florence Pugh movie on there. It's like a period piece. There's just, and they're not promoting any of it. I should also note that you literally just have to be scrolling through their catalog. But the fact that that stuff is there and that they're most likely going to start promoting the streamer even more because it's free has me wondering what this library is going to start looking like.
I'm very excited about that because I've always thought, living outside the US, I've always thought that the streamer itself looked like one of the more exciting things about the network, because you don't hear about things doing that an awful lot. And but the downside of that is I never really felt like they made the most of it. Could you imagine if maybe they uploaded the episodes of their own shows maybe an hour or two after they aired so that everyone could watch them? Or you know what I mean? I just feel like sometimes they miss the initial buzz of when people are actually talking about the show, and then it's quietly added the day after. That's just one criticism. I'm not meaning to be critical. I just feel like that this was such a great idea. I don't think they've made the most of it yet, but one thing I will say about this new management is they seem to be intent on making the most of what they've got and maximizing it. So if they can do that, I think that's an exciting idea, because like I said, I think the streamer had so much potential, and it could be an exciting new era for it if they acquire a few things that are on it as well.
I wonder what's gonna come next, besides obviously CW originals for that platform. It's an interesting time for the CW, though it's also a scary time, because Brad told IndieWire that he has 14 post-it notes that are blank on his office wall, and those 14 post-it notes are reserved for the CW shows that are staying, I believe. And he hasn't made any decisions on them, which is why it was said that everything's on the bubble, because they mean that. Regardless of like popularity on the internet, not that they don't want to make groundbreaking television, but they also want to make television that's profitable. Not a single show is safe right now. And yes, that includes Superman and Lois. Not to send anybody into a panic. It's just, he was very upfront about that when asked by various different outlets what's safe. And he's like, I don't know yet. Like,
Yeah, he said he had to like crunch all the numbers, right? He had to look at
yes.
everything when he started.
Mhm.
I mean,
He's
that makes
going through
sense. It sucks, but
merits.
it makes sense.
It does, but it's like, we don't have these numbers. So like the only numbers that we have are ratings numbers. And he's talking about profitability. He's talking about revenue. He said,
Yeah, we don't have access to that.
no, he's like, we're not talking about international revenue. We're not talking about streaming revenue that other people make. He's talking about what shows bring in money for the network. And I don't know who does that, like, at all. So it's just interesting to see. I mean, he did mention also that there are ones that are like very profitable but not profitable for the network. So those could go just like, I don't know who. I mean, I'm thinking about Netflix deals right now, and I'm just like, please be profitable for the network too.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's go back to the whole thing of the old CW worked as the format that it was. The new CW wants a new format. And so even if the shows are profitable in theory, the network wants to make the money. And I think that's the most important thing here. So again, we can't make any informed decisions because we don't know. That's not information. It sounded like Brad wasn't up to date on the information yet. And that was one of his first tasks, is that he's going to go and look and see what's profitable. I know it's a very scary time for all the shows. I mean, all we can do right now is just keep the faith. I feel like the most successful ones will at least make it through another year, but we'll just have to wait and see what successful looks like to the CW.
I know. I thought this conversation would make me feel better, but it's not. I was feeling so good after reading the Hollywood Reporter one, only because of the transparency. And now I feel not shaken. I was shaken prior to this, only because it was just after Stargirl's cancellation. I was like, okay, then what are you looking for? Right? What are the if it's not ratings, what is it? And Brad was like, here's what we're looking for. Like, and I'll be so he starts on Monday, November 7th. So that's next week. Oh, it's on the day the pod drops. Hey.
Well, look, he seems like he's very aware of his position and where the network is in terms of the business and public perception. And I know there's this idea, this like catastrophic apocalyptic idea among fans that they will cancel everything and it'll be a completely new network and nothing will be the same and they're going to just like tank it. And I, for the life of me, can't see that ever happening. Will we lose more shows by the end of the season? I mean, probably, but I don't think Brad's going to cut ties. This is me hoping and what I foresee. He's gonna slowly try to bridge the gap to like boost this network back up. So I don't think it's gonna be as like doomsday as most people are going for, which that attitude kind of it stresses me out and irritates me because I'm like, I know things have been bad, but I don't think it's going to get even worse, like to the extreme. Like, I don't think everything's going to be canceled and they're going to, it's
No.
just, that's bad for business, as I've said before. And I think he's aware of that. I
Yeah.
hope.
It seems like it. I mean, he's as transparent as he could possibly be. I mean, he even has the same question everyone else does. Why aren't the shows getting the ratings that you would think that they would be getting? And that's something that he wants to answer, which I'm
And I
like,
don't
great.
think to answer that question is to get rid of everything and start fresh. Like, that's just
Mhm.
not how you do it. You have to lift up the things that you have to keep people coming back.
Mhm. This is not going to turn into a WGN America situation. I think that's what everyone is scared of because that's what Nexstar did. And it's now News Nation or something. I was like, they didn't buy the CW to scrap it and then create their
No
own
one's gonna watch
thing.
that.
No, but it is not, I guess, not worrisome, but they did say that a name change isn't happening, but the yet was there. And even when Brad answered, he was like, look, we got to get in there and figure out what is pulling people in. Like, where is the audience? What is our audience? What are they interested in? Like, and like step 2 would be like figuring out if there's a name change or not. And I was like, there's not a name change. Like, there doesn't need to be a name change. Really, because I mean, not that people didn't know WGN America, but I wouldn't say that I had the brand that the CW does. Like, people know what the CW is, so why would you change the network name? Um, Especially because it's part of like the big networks. I mean, yeah, it's like their kid sister, but like she's out here, and it just feels weird. I mean, I guess everyone will have to adjust if they do change it, but I vote nay for a name change. Not that my vote matters, but if the mole was listening, let them know that it's a no from me.
Watch us all like panic and they just drop the.
That, yeah, that would be the thing that would happen. You're right. I hope that's actually what happens.
We'll cope with that one.
We will. We'll be okay. We can lose the article. But Brad wasn't the only new hire. There's also Beth Feldman, who is going to be SVP of Network Communications. Just to give some quote, this is a quote. Apparently, she has deep connections to the television entertainment industry and vast experience creating successful promotional and awareness campaigns for a broad array of news, talk, and entertainment programming, which makes her an invaluable resource for the CW. She's innovative and a creative thinker and has well-established relationships with important media outlets across the country and here in Hollywood. And I was like, are you coming in to get promo stuff? Because yes.
I know. I mean, like, we need someone involved with their hands in that basket. Like, if there's one thing the CW could benefit from more, it's promo. It sounds, I feel like I'm building up to some sort of big revelation, but I feel like the only people who didn't realize that were the CW. And I think this network does not have the visibility it used to. It's been running on fumes for so long. And while you have big brands like DC, that works, but it only works for so long. So, I mean, like, yay. I hope we have more promo in the future because this sounds like a hire I can definitely get behind. I think this is a good thing.
Beth, we have ideas if you need anybody to consult.
Yes, we do. I mean, you could go through the previous pods or we can make you an itemized list. I don't know, but we have them at the ready.
Find us on Twitter.
I also hired is Rebecca Dopp, who's going to be the Executive Vice President of Distribution Strategy and Affiliate Relations. According to Dana Zimmer, who is the President and Chief Distribution and Strategy Officer for Nexstar, Rebecca is a leader and strategic thinker who bring an incredible skill set to the CW because she has both the depth and breadth of experience in the linear broadcast, digital, and streaming world, and will be a formidable presence leading the distribution of the CW network. And I was like, okay. Especially the streaming angle, since Brad had talked about streaming as well, I was like, are we going to see a lot more commercials for the CW app popping up in not just the CW's channel, but other channels as well?
Again, that feels like one of the things they haven't maximized on the most. So, if they can get it out there and let a lot of people know about it, I think that'd be a great thing. I think the thing that excites me the most about this one is the distribution part of it, because I'm like, international distribution is my thing, and it feels like now that this network's so worried about on the night and ratings and stuff like that it's not international as a distribution is not going to be their primary objective anymore. And I get it not being your primary objective, but I don't want to fall by the wayside, because like I said before, the CW has produced some of the most famous shows in the world. They just didn't know they were on the CW. And I feel like going forward, if they could continue to do that, that'd be a great thing. So I hope this is the beginning of a new chapter for that international distribution part of the network, because again, I like their shows. I like them when they're on TV over here. Like, keep them coming.
My one concern, though, is the emphasis on localism. But that was specifically about Nexstar. So perhaps that just meant that they really want to make sure things are getting out to the affiliate stations, like all the information needed for what's happening at CW, and that they're not pulling back from international. Pulling back from international would be a mistake, not in this globalized world. Like, you need the other countries, even if you're not watching on the night, especially because like the branded DVD cases. Wouldn't it be great to say CW right on the front instead of the studios?
Oh, I totally feel like that's going to happen. I think I mentioned that maybe a few pods back. I can't remember, but I feel like a lot more networks are doing that. Like CBS especially has like CBS original above all of their shows. I think it would be really cool if it would said like CW original above the logo. I think that'd be so cool.
It would be. They should do that. Hopefully that's coming. Which also makes me wonder if we're going to get a logo update soon. I don't know how long it's been since they did one. I mean, not that I don't like the one they have now, but they changed
I think
hands.
we've had it for a long time.
Yeah. If I remember those SmackDown episodes from 2006, I'm pretty sure it looked the same back then. So, I mean, why not get a new one?
Just a little makeover.
Yeah.
Refresh her up a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds exciting though. That sounds a little fun. Maybe they will do that. And perhaps I focus on creating the logo, like a new one, and like move away from the idea of dropping the licensing fee to $1 million an episode. Maybe we should like
now that caused panic. And at first I was like, I don't understand why, because it didn't make sense to me. I was like, this is beyond my pay grade. I don't know what this means.
I think the thing that caused made people panic the most is some of the articles did make time to mention this, and it sounds like a jibe, but it's just stating a fact that said the CW already has the lowest budgeted shows on television. So how do you make them even cheaper? And I get it. I do get it, because television is not cheap, and yet some television can look cheap. So where's the fine line there? I believe I read somewhere that the CW shows are budgeted at, is it the low end of 1 million, somewhere between there, up to 2 million. So how do you produce an episode of television for 1 million or below? You know what I mean? Like,
I just wonder where the budget cuts would come from to produce them for less money. Would we see it in a quality shift, or God forbid, I hope it doesn't mean that they're just going to make the production day shorter, and that means more work for the cast and crew. That seems like the worst case scenario. Like, nobody needs to be overworked because no one wants to dish out an extra couple $1 million.
And I think, again, cost cutting seems to be their priority here. And they said that shows get more expensive as they go on. But if you look at any conversations online, you'll find out that the fans don't think they look more expensive as they go on.
Well, I'm sure they allocate the money differently. Probably more money is given to the cast, and they try to cut costs for production. So like, whereas I'm going to just give Riverdale as an example. I know nothing about how the budget went on the show, but I'm assuming when they cast the show, all of the young cast members were newcomers, so they didn't have to pay them that much. So they could pay a little bit more to the adults on the show, and also the quality of the show. But as we saw those kids get really famous, and they're like in every commercial and like every movie, and they're killing it, they probably were paid a little bit more. And there may have been some cutbacks on quality, but that doesn't, I mean, that's par for the course. I think on any show you kind of see where on a long running show, you see where they kind of level out, and they do with what they can. They're not really like reaching for the stars anymore with like extensive shoots and anything. But yeah, I think you naturally start to see that on any long running show.
And I think the fear now is that you when a show hits maybe its 5th season and it starts to look the same, and it could run to season 10 and everything looks the same after season 5 because it's just less exciting visually because they have a smaller production budget. That doesn't mean the show's cheaper to produce. But I think now the fear is that our show is going to start looking that dull and similar right from the off, because
maybe,
you know what I mean. You can accept it when your show has been on for that long because that's what it looks like, but these shows aren't going to be that appealing if they all start looking cheaper. And it's about getting it right. I know apparently the CW has received pushback internally from that thought process because it's not feasible. And again, that casts doubt on some of their bigger shows like Superman at Lois, because it has some of the better CGI. It's the best CGI on the CW or Stargirl, and it's probably some of the best CGI you'll see on television, which again is so.
But you don't think the green screen in the car, the driving scenes of the Winchesters are like immaculate and perfect? What are you saying, Michael?
You know what I'm like with my DC streaming quality TV.
But no shade to the Winchesters, by the way. It's
absolutely
it's
not.
as is.
Absolutely not. We love it and accept it for what it is. Just like
it's just, I mean, it's just not great, but
no, it's okay. They said we don't need the budget for that. We don't need it for that.
We're using it elsewhere.
Yeah, they allocated it wisely.
It's fine.
But there is exactly my point. You have all these shows that do require money for that, and are those scenes going to be cut out now, or are those shows going to be cut out now? You know what I mean? Like, where does the dictation of that decision start and end? Is it just about, well, we're going to produce less expensive shows, and you're like, okay, but does that mean you're going to stop producing supernatural shows because they're more expensive? Example, we did say when we found out they wanted to produce shows that weren't geared at teenagers and weren't necessarily superhero shows, the 2 shows in danger were Nancy Drew and Stargirl. And there you go. They're both the next 2 that were gone at the start of this new era. Is it going to continue like that? I think they're going to need to figure out what they want this cheaper era of TV to look like, because the CW already had a reputation for being the cheapest of the 5 networks. How do you make it cheaper? And if your shows aren't visually appealing to audiences, but more importantly, buyers, how do you plan on making the money back? Or how do you plan on making any money from these cheap shows that you tightened your belt on? You know what I mean? Like, this could end up backfiring. And I think they need to cut it right down the middle and find out how do the cons outweigh the pros, or vice versa. Because right now it's a bit of an awkward middle ground, and I can see arguments for both. But at the end of the day, you got to spend money to make money.
You do. I do think that means that there's an opportunity for the CW to start doing content that is more limited in nature. So like shorter seasons, maybe even limited series, maybe a discussion about TV movies. Like, I think everyone's big fear has been, if they're capping at $1 million, that means like the CW is going to be overrun with unscripted content that they can make on the cheap and just put out there. And that's not to say unscripted content isn't going to be beefed up. It is. But it was interesting that Brad was like, scripted content is not going anywhere. There's just going to be less of it. And he kept mentioning being scrappy. And I was like, oh, we're going to get like people who are just starting to cut their teeth in Hollywood, the ones who are willing to like, I think it was you, Reed, who made an example of being in the closet, like, and you're trying to make it look like they're on just on one side. So we're in a really small shot, but it looks beautiful once you put it on screen, but you wouldn't know that they were like, the door was cracked and they were filming from the crack right there. It's only 2 people close together. Like, who knows? That might not be the case, but we might start seeing some practical use of effects rather than CGI. I mean, I will say that has been a problem for a lot of Hollywood. If they can CGI it now, they will, instead of just using practical effects. And practical effects are actually really beautiful when people know how to do it, and it can look even better than CGI, especially if you can't afford the CGI that is going to fool people. So it'd just be best to do it practically. I mean, interestingly enough, the Winchester seems to be like low on CGI and visual effects and higher on doing practical things, which is giving it a dated look, but it's a dated look that's full of nostalgia. So it works for them. So perhaps we'll be seeing more of that. But yeah, I think you're right about less supernatural shows going forward.
And I'll cope provided they keep the ones we have at the moment. Like at the end of the day, they helped the CW find its modern audience after teen dramas came and went. So yes, find a new footing and find a new look, but don't alienate what got you to this point.